So I would say that everybody we all kind of knew that the day would come. And like you said, I mean, it wasn't fatalistic. It wasn't complacency. It was the realistic assessment of where we were at. And I think everybody knew that the day would come. And maybe if someone says they didn't, it was only because they were, able to convince themselves that to keep a positive attitude. And the day did come. And we'd had a couple guys get wounded. Cowie was wounded bad.
A lot of close calls.
Countless close calls. Which, in a way, kind of make you feel like maybe we can pull this off. But in the end, it's war. So, what did that do to you? August 2nd.
2006. It's hard to articulate in words what that day did. I talked a little bit in the beginning of how my father has shaped my actions to become a SEAL. Well, I'd say the events that unfolded on August 2nd, 2006 and days afterwards, where we lost much better warriors than I, much braver and selfless, that those were much more formative in shaping what I do and will do for the rest of my life. We lost the actions of that day. We lost two really good men. I don't even know where to start. One of my good friends, one of our good friends, Ryan Job, was hit in the face. God, I learned a lot that day. I think we all did. And a piece of us stayed there that day, died with us. Ryan was hit in the face, and I remember going, single cracks are usually not good. The crack, in the crack, when I say crack, I mean when you are on the giving end of a rifle, it's a much different sound than being on the receiving end of a rifle, of a bullet that's supersonic. It makes a very distinctive crack. And when you hear that, and it's a single one, it generally is not good. And I remember that radio call coming out from Leif saying that Ryan had been hit and that I was needed. And I remember going on the roof and seeing Ryan lying down in a pool of his blood. And there's these images in my head that just have so much human compassion in a crazy, chaotic time. And I remember Leif and Chris at his side, and Leif was holding his hand, and just saying, "Just hang on, brother. Just hang on, man." And I did the best I could to stabilize Ryan, but Ryan's a trooper. I mean, he was the best of us. even then, not concerned about his own welfare, making sure that we were safe. We were being safe and staying low. And we had Mark was there, laying down some good covering fire to get Ryan out of that position, and we called on our brothers from the Army to bring us the armor we needed to get out of there, and I'm very grateful for that. So I accompanied Ryan out of there, and there's not much you can do as a medic in that type of situation. I'm not keeping Ryan alive. I'm keeping his airway open, stopping the bleeding, and that's it. He's keeping himself alive. And the definitive care he needed was a surgeon. He needed to get to an operating table stat. And we talk about things to learn from that day. Failures. I had one of my biggest failures from that day. And it pains me to this day because Ryan didn't see it that way. We stopped off at one of the aid stations, I think, at Cop Falcon along the way, which, just to paint this room, it was a concrete 20 feet by 20 feet room with no electricity, no running water. Definitely not a place to get definitive care. And it was being manned by an 04 Army physician's assistant, who I think had the best of intentions, but had other clouding human emotions that resulted in poor judgment. One being ego, which is perhaps the biggest poison of all in anything we do. And just to give you an idea of this, I mean, it was a war zone down there. I mean, just a few days prior to that, we had been mortared in that area, and a few Army soldiers were hit by this mortar bad. And we were pretty close in Cop Falcon, and I went over to try and help. And some of these guys were pretty hypovolemic, which is a word for saying they were low on blood volume because they were losing it. And I was trying to get IV access on one of these guys, and I had a hard time doing it. Eventually was able to get a stick in the neck. But this, the guy who was manning it, this 04, was, just giving me a hard time about it, which it's fine. I think we give each other a hard time. We make fun of each other. But I think, I took it hard myself because I was like, man, I really wanted to help these guys, and I was failing in getting this line in, getting an IV line in. And I was naive and just I think insecure. I was professionally embarrassed that I could not get this line in. And I was a little intimidated by this guy. So I had that painting of this situation, with this relationship with this person. And coming in, I knew that coming into this aid station at Cop Falcon was only going to hurt Ryan. And I was yelling at the Army guys. E1, E2 drivers who were just doing what they were told. I'm like, we need to go to Camp Ramadi right now to get to an OR. And they were telling me we need to stop off at this aid. We have orders to stop off at this aid station. And Ryan's on this cot. And there's no way to give definitive care. You can't even be sterile in this area. It's just a concrete room with no electricity. And he was trying to give an NPA, nasopharyngeal airway to Ryan, which is a little, remember the trumpet nose you put in, keeps an airway secure. But you never, ever give an NPA to folks listening to this who have any kind of medical background. You would never give an NPA to someone with suspected facial, with suspected maxillary fractures, which is what Ryan certainly had after being shot through the left cheek, right, around the left orbit. And I was top of my lungs arguing with this guy that this is not what he needed. Like, you should not do that. We needed to get to Camp Ramadi. And there was a certain power differential, right? I mean, I was E5, 21, 22-year-old kid, and I had this 04 who was telling me how things should be done. And Ryan's there, hearing all of this. And I, like a lot of Army regulations, I mean, I'm not trying to give any disrespect to the Army, but the two drivers who drove me there were like, you need to clear and safe your weapon. And, if you remember, there's always a barrel outside of every building. You have to clear and safe it. And I understand because there's a lot of accidental discharges that happen in the military. but for team guys, I think that's like clearing having to point your weapon in a barrel to clear and safe it is not really, you don't need to do that. We just clear and safe in the safe direction, right? Just be responsible, have accountability for muzzle awareness and what you're doing. So I was like, and I was trying to fight this fight with this PA, and the other Army soldiers were trying to you need to go outside right now and clear this weapon. So frustrated, I left, cleared my weapon, I came back, and the PA had inserted the MPA into Ryan, and Ryan was coughing up blood and bad, and I saw the look on this PA's face. That I think he recognized that this was outside his scope of abilities and that he was in over his head and may have hurt Ryan. And from there, my request to get to Camp Ramadi was immediately fulfilled. And we got back in and loaded Ryan and got Ryan to Camp Ramadi to the appropriate level of care to awaiting surgeons and doctors to take care of Ryan. But to me, that's one of my biggest failures because I let Ryan down. And what pains me is that in the years afterwards, he always thanked me that I stood up for him. And Ryan, I don't know why you're thanking me. I failed you. I could have done something more. I could have stood up for my friend a little bit more. I could have, I don't know what I could have done, but I could have done something. Ryan deserved better. And who knows what this did. I mean, Ryan was blind, as you know, afterwards, but he says I was the last person he saw. He wishes I was a little prettier. Ryan likely became blind secondary to infection, swelling, trauma. But maybe that was the final straw that made him blind and eventually led to him getting all those surgeries, which eventually took his life. As you know, he had multiple surgeries, and one of his surgeries, he was unfortunately taken from us. I don't know. But I made a promise after that regardless of my rank, of where I stood, or of what kind of power differential I was, if I saw something wrong like that and I knew someone would get hurt, that I would stand up and speak and not let something like that ever happen again. We see things happen all the time that we know aren't right. Sometimes you just know deep down that that's not right. And you choose your battles. I think it's important to choose what battles you stand up for. But there are some battles that you should never, ever stand down from. And I swore I would never make that mistake again. And I find it very relevant today. I mean, we accept the risks of our occupation for the greater good, of what it does for society, our country, our species, and it's relevant in space exploration in NASA, at what I've been honored and privileged to take a part of. And we accept the risks of what we are trying to do for the general good, of what it brings back to humanity. But I think having that experience to know it's worth cashing in that currency, that reputation you've built up to speak up when something is up, when something's messed up. It's one of the, I feel like we could talk about that day for the rest